People always ask when I realized my sister wasn't just competitive, but a thief of the most personal kind. It wasn't when she flirted with my high school boyfriend, or when she cried on the shoulder of the man I planned to marry. It was the night I unlocked Cole's apartment and found her in his bed, smirking like she'd finally taken the last thing I had. Most people crumble in moments like that. I didn't. Something steadier moved through me, something I didn't recognize yet. Because that night, without knowing it, I'd already met the man who would end her life as she knew it. Growing up, people used to say my sister Diana and I were a study in contrasts. She was the kind of girl who didn't just walk into a room, she rearranged it. Bright smile, sharp jawline, hair that fell perfectly without trying. I was quieter, softer around the edges, more likely to tidy the table after dinner than command the conversation. Mom said we balanced each other, but balance isn't the word I would use. The first time I noticed something was off, we were in high school. I was dating Tyler, a sweet, slightly awkward boy who carried my books and blushed whenever I touched his hand. One afternoon, he came over so we could study for a biology test. We were halfway through flashcards when Diana drifted into the living room wearing her cheer hoodie, pretending she couldn't solve a simple equation. Tyler leaned in to help and I watched something flicker across her face, an interest that had nothing to do with math. Before I continue the story, tell me first, where did you hear this from? Write it in the comments because what happens next, most people won't believe. A week later he stopped texting as often. A month later they were just hanging out, which everyone at school knew was code for something else. Mom said I was being dramatic. Diana can't help being charming. She laughed like it was a compliment. By the time I started dating Caleb after graduation, I'd convinced myself the first situation was bad luck. But history repeated itself. At a family dinner, Caleb tried to tell a story about his new job, and Diana placed her hand on his arm like she'd known him for years. Mom noticed, of course, but instead of calling Diana out, she whispered to me in the kitchen, "Maybe stop bringing your boyfriends here. You know how easily she gets attached." The logic was so backward it made my teeth ache, but I stayed quiet. Staying quiet was something I'd mastered. When Mason came along, a coworker who made me laugh during overnight shifts, I told no one except Mom. She promised she wouldn't mention him. A week later, Diana bumped into him at a coffee shop in our town and suddenly needed career advice. You don't want to guess how that ended, but Evan hurt the most. We were together 2 years. We talked about rings, apartments, future kids. He met my grandparents, memorized my coffee order, left a spare hoodie at my place. We were real. And even then, Diana found her angle emotional emergency at midnight, crying on his shoulder. Mom telling me, Evan's too kind. He can't ignore a girl in distress. When the relationship fell apart, no one looked surprised but me. I told myself I'd grow numb to betrayal, that heartbreak had a limit, but numbness is a myth. Hurt accumulates, reshaping you piece by piece. Then came Cole, a man I didn't even introduce to my family for 8 months because for once I wanted something untouched, unshared, unthreatened. He felt different, steady, real. I thought I'd finally outgrown the curse. I didn't understand then that secrets don't protect you. They just delay the inevitable. I should have known peace doesn't last in my family. It took just one slip, one careless moment for everything to unravel. I was at a cousin's barbecue when May, who has never been able to whisper at an appropriate volume, leaned over the grill and said, "So, how's that guy you're seeing? The one in Denver, the tall one?" She said it casually, flipping a burger, not realizing she'd just handed Diana the coordinates to invade the last safe corner of my life. I felt my stomach drop. Diana's head snapped up from across the table, her eyes bright with curiosity. "Guy in Denver?" she asked. Voice sugar sweet but sharp underneath. I forced a laugh, changed the subject, but the damage was done. Diana has never needed details. Just a hint of something I valued was enough to ignite her hunt. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed replaying May's words, each one landing like a needle. Cole didn't post much online, but he existed. He had a job, a face, name, and Diana was frighteningly skilled at finding what she wanted. If she could track down Mason with nothing but a coffee cup logo, she could find Cole with much less. For a few days, nothing happened. Cole and I went on dates in neighboring towns, grabbed cheap tacos after his shifts, watched late-night documentaries on his cooch, but there was a tightness in my chest I couldn't shake. A constant scanning of shadows for signs of her. Then the small things started. Cole hesitated before answering my calls. He ended dates early, saying he was tired. His texts grew shorter. I told myself he was stressed with work, but deep down I recognized the pattern, the quiet drift, the emotional detour. One afternoon I walked into a grocery store and froze. Diana stood in the produce aisle wearing an outfit she never wore in our town, Too polished, too intentional. She wasn't holding a basket. She wasn't shopping. She was waiting. And when her phone lit up, she smiled at the screen. In a way that made my skin go cold. I didn't confront her. I just walked out with my heart pounding and my throat dry. I told myself I was being paranoid. But the truth is, you can't mistake the scent of smoke when you've lived through enough fires. 2 nights later, Cole cancelled our dinner, saying he needed some alone time. His voice was distant, clipped. Something inside me tightened, but I didn't push. I just said good night and sat in silence long after the call ended. The next morning before sunrise, I drove to his apartment with a bag of breakfast pastries and a hope I didn't fully believe in. His car was outside. The lights in his living room were on. The hallway smelled like detergent and burnt toast. I unlocked the door quietly like I'd done dozens of times. And there she was, Diana in his bed, Cole beside her. Her hair spilled across his pillow like she owned the place. Her expression wasn't guilty, wasn't startled. It was triumphant, like this was the victory she'd been building toward her entire life. I guess secrets aren't your thing, she said, voice lazy, satisfied. Cole didn't even look ashamed. Something fractured inside me, clean and final. That was the night my breaking point became my beginning. In the days after I found Diana in Cole's bed, the world around me felt muffled, like someone had stuffed cotton into my ears. I moved through my shifts mechanically, answering patients, charting vitals, pretending I wasn't replaying that bedroom scene on loop. People think heartbreak is loud screaming, crying, throwing things. Mine was quiet, a slow freeze spreading under my skin. Mom called the next morning not to check on me but to chastise. You can't blame your sister for being magnetic, she said. Maybe you should think about why your relationships keep slipping away. I held the phone to my ear and listened to my mother analyze my failures as if she'd been waiting for the chance. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. Something inside me had gone still. A week later, on a cold afternoon, I walked into a small coffee shop after my shift just to avoid going home. I ordered tea I didn't want and sat by the window staring at nothing. That's when a man at the next table asked if the seat across from me was taken. He was tall, sharply dressed, and carried himself like someone used to being listened to. He introduced himself as Victor Reyes. I told him my name, expecting nothing of the conversation, but he had a way of speaking that made people lean in. Smooth, practiced, almost warm if you didn't look too closely. We talked casually about work, the weather, the city. I didn't volunteer anything personal, but when his phone buzzed and he said something about a business proposal meeting, something flickered inside me, an instinct not of attraction but recognition. Diana would have noticed him from a mile away. Men like Victor were her weakness, self-assured, polished, a little mysterious. He asked if I wanted to grab dinner sometime. I said no but thanked him politely. When I stood to leave, his eyes followed me, calculating. Not predatory, just curious, like he'd spotted a puzzle he wanted to solve. That night I looked him up. His name appeared in news articles. Nothing criminal, nothing confirmed, just whispers of messy breakups and lawsuits tied to business disputes. A man who charmed easily, who burned bridges quietly, who left chaos behind without technically committing a crime. The kind of man Diana would chase without hesitation. I didn't introduce him to her directly. I didn't have to. A few days later I mentioned him casually at a family dinner when Mom asked if I'd met anyone new. I downplayed it, almost shrugging it off. Diana didn't blink, didn't comment, but I watched her take mental notes the way a hawk registers movement in the grass. 3 days later she ran into him at a downtown coffee shop, the same one where I'd met him. By the following week she was texting him non-stop. By the next they were dating. And for the first time in my entire life I didn't warn her, I didn't intervene, I didn't protect her from herself. I simply stepped out of the way. When Diana fell for Victor, she didn't fall gently. She plunged reckless, breathless, certain she discovered a man who finally matched her shine. Their first date turned into a weekend trip. By week 3 she was posting filtered photos of wine glasses and city skylines, always angled to hint at luxury without revealing the man beside her. She loved the performance more than the relationship itself, and Victor knew exactly how to feed that hunger. Within a month she was practically living in his downtown apartment. She bragged about the skyline view, the marble counters, the elevator that needed a key card. It feels like I'm finally with someone on my level, she told me during one of her rare calls she only made when she wanted someone to admire her. I listened, said very little, and kept my voice steady. Victor wasn't cruel at first. Men like him rarely are. He was attentive, generous in gestures, skilled at crafting an image. But underneath those polished layers was something colder, something I'd sensed even before Diana did. The first fracture came quietly. Diana called one night saying she was short on money for shared expenses at the apartment. "I'm investing in our future," she said breathlessly. "Victor says it's smart to combine finances early. It shows trust." She said it like she was reciting lines he fed her. A week later, she withdrew $30,000, her entire savings, to invest in a project Victor was spearheading. She explained it like she understood the details. She didn't. I knew what was coming, but I didn't say a word. Soon the tone of her call shifted. She still boasted, but her voice trembled at the edges. She asked if breakouts on her skin could be caused by stress, if it was normal that Victor had the only key card, if it was healthy for him to check her messages for transparency. "He loves me," she insisted, but her voice cracked. Then came the night. She whispered into the phone. Do you think someone can love you and still scare you?" My throat tightened, but I forced my answer to stay neutral. "What do you think?" She didn't respond. A few days later, the fear in her voice was clearer. Victor had asked her to sign a few papers related to their shared expenses, bills, authorizations, statements. She admitted she hadn't read everything. "It's normal," she said. "Couples do this all the time." "Right," I said nothing. My silence wasn't punishment, it was finally giving her the space to face herself. Then everything caved in at once. It was early morning when my phone buzzed non-stop. First from Diana, then Mom, then from an unknown number. I ignored the first few calls until May finally texted, "Turn on the news." I did. A headline scrolled across the bottom of the screen. "Investigation into financial misconduct leads to raid at downtown apartment." The building looked familiar, even from the helicopter footage. Glass balconies, steel framing, police vehicles crowding the entrance. Reporters stood outside. Microphones pointed toward the chaos. By the time I reached the apartment, agents were still inside. The hallway was filled with clipped orders, rustling documents, nervous neighbors whispering. Diana sat against the wall with a blanket around her shoulders, shaking not from cold, but from the sudden collapse of the world she'd built on illusion. When she looked up and saw me, her face contorted into something between relief and shame. "He used me," she whispered. He said I was helping him. I thought I was part of something important." She looked terrified, not of the agents but of herself. An investigator approached, holding a folder thick with printed statements. "You signed these," he said gently. Multiple times. He wasn't accusing. He was informing her of the reality she'd walked straight into. "I didn't read them," Diana cried. "He told me they were routine." The agent nodded sympathetically but remained firm. "Not reading them doesn't erase liability." That sentence cracked something in her. A sob tore out of her chest, raw and unfiltered. Mom rushed in moments later, frantic hair messy like she'd sprinted the entire way. "Where is she?" "Diana, baby, talk to me." She knelt beside her, cupping her face. "We'll fix this. We'll get you a lawyer. Then she turned on me. "This is your fault," she hissed. "You knew, you must have known what kind of man he was." Her words were knives, but they didn't cut like they used to. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't defend myself. "Diana made her choices," I said quietly. "For years she took from me without consequence. This time she took from the wrong person." Mom stared at me like I was someone she'd never seen before. Diana shook her head, tears streaming. "Please," she whispered, "don't leave me alone." For a moment I felt the old instinct rise. Is the urge to protect her from everything, even herself. But then I remembered the countless nights I'd cried alone, the relationship she'd shredded, the way she'd smiled in Cole's bed like she'd won something. I knelt beside her, meeting her eyes. "You're not alone," I said softly, "but you are responsible." Her shoulders sagged under the weight of those words. Victor, meanwhile, was escorted past us in handcuffs, expression blank, posture rigid. He didn't look at Diana once. In the days that followed, the investigation unraveled layers of financial misconduct tied to his name. Diana wasn't charged with the most serious counts, but she was held accountable for the documents she'd signed. She took a plea deal to reduce penalties, but the damage was already done, ruined. Credit drained, accounts looming. Restitution, a criminal record she'd carry like a shadow. She moved out of the apartment with nothing but a duffel bag. Mom cried, Dad stayed quiet, and I walked behind them, hands in my pockets, feeling nothing and everything at once. A few nights later, as I sat alone in my apartment, I finally exhaled. Not a triumphant breath, just a release. A long overdue acceptance that justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it unfolds quietly in the spaces where you stop shielding someone from the consequences they choose. If you felt that kind of betrayal, the slow erosion of your worth, then you understand why I didn't intervene, why I couldn't. Some patterns only break when the person creating them hits a wall they can't walk through. And if you want to follow stories like this, stories about boundaries, justice, and what happens when silence finally breaks, there's a place for you. Support us on Ivory Revenge. By subscribing, you'll get notified the moment a new story goes live. Diana didn't go to prison, but the consequences clung to her like smoke long after the investigation ended. With a plea deal in place, she avoided the worst charges yet. The fallout was crushing, her savings gone. Her credit destroyed, her name now tied to a scandal she barely understood. Mom tried to shield her at first, insisting the world had been unfair, but even she couldn't rewrite the facts printed on the bills and statements arriving every week. Within a month, Diana packed what little she had left and moved to Portland, taking a job at a small cafe. The girl who once floated through rooms now moved carefully, shoulders tight, eyes tired. I checked her social media. Only once she looked older, quieter, almost unrecognizable. As for me, I finally started therapy. I told the truth out loud for the first time. The years of comparison, the pattern of betrayal, the exhaustion of always being the one expected to understand. Healing didn't come quickly, but it came honestly. Dad and I grew closer. Mom avoided the topic entirely, and in the rare quiet moments I realized something simple. Sometimes the only way to reclaim your life is to stop bleeding. For people who never notice you're hurt, looking back now, I don't feel triumph or revenge in the way people expect. What I feel is clarity. The kind that settles in when you finally stop fighting to be valued by someone determined to dim you. Diana's downfall wasn't my victory. It was the natural end of a path she refused to step off. And my healing didn't begin when she broke. It began the moment I chose myself instead of chasing her approval. If any part of my story echoes something in your own life, you're not alone. Share your thoughts below and tell me where you're watching from, and if you'd like more stories like this. Don't forget to subscribe for the next.